If you could talk just a little bit about the making of it. I like several different interesting stories, but I know that you were thinking of, a lot of times when you watch it, you'll be going through... We're running. A lot of times when you watch it, you'll say, oh, that was my line, that was Mary's line, oh, we did that together, laughed about that. And when you're watching about it this time, your experience was very different, so if you could talk a little bit about that.
It's just funny to think about and to remember 14 years ago the collaboration of it, because collaboration is such a fun, interesting thing that I love, obviously, especially with Mary. We've done a bunch of movies together. There's the scene where he's confessing everything. And that was my homage. I was like, Mary, I really feel like we should make an homage to the book. And all the things that we didn't put in the movie, because there's so many horrific, horrible, gross things that are in the book that are not in the movie. So many. Like, I think this movie is like 15% of what's actually in the book. I was like, but I feel like I just, as someone who was trained as a fiction writer, I feel like I need to give respect to the writer, to the novelist. So I'm going to try to make a speech. It's just everything we didn't see. And I love it. But Mary, she's Canadian, and she was educated at Oxford in England, and she spent most of her life, her 20s, in London, and so she's very different from me. I'm very American. So she would always be like, oh, wait, it's so horrific. If you knew her, you'd know I'm doing a flawless impression of her. As someone I've worked with for like 15 years. And she was like, it's horrific, but it's genius. Which is the best thing you can ever want in a collaborator, that she calls you a genius at some point. What else? There's a moment in the business card scene, which is everybody's favorite scene, where Matt Ross, the actor who's emerges as the gay character, says like, oh, Patrick, so tasteful. How did you? No, he says, how did you get to be so tasteful? And he just goes, lucky, I guess. But actually, that's not in the book. That's actually a line from North by Northwest, which is, how does a girl like you get to be a girl like you? Lucky, I guess. And which is something that I love to say when anyone gives me any compliment at all. I'm just like, lucky, I guess. And so I forgot that I had given this what translates into a very gay thing to say in that moment. Lucky, I guess. I encourage you all.
Okay, so one of my big questions really comes from, has anybody read the book? Okay. I hope I don't offend you, but my opinion about Bret Easton Ellis is that he was very misogynistic. And so I think it's really interesting to take this book and then have two feminist screenwriters adapt it. And I'd really like to know what is some of your thinking about that. I know you've also gotten some feedback from feminists, obviously, over the years about the film and whether or not it's a misogynistic film. I don't personally think that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, Bret Ellis, the novelist, is a gay man, which is just an interesting fact. And at the time we were doing it, he wasn't particularly open about it, but he is now. And he always said, well, first of all, Mary came to me and she said, I know you hate horror movies and I know you hate scary things, but I think this will be a brilliant, actually feminist book. I was like, really? You're gonna make me read a book called American Psycho? Like, I'm just so scared. I'm just super afraid again. But I read it, and when we met Bret for the first time, the first thing I said to him was, what the fuck is your problem? You were so weird. Like, what are you talking about? And he said to us, I thought I was writing a feminist book. I thought I was writing an obvious expose of who men are in relation to women and who men are in relationship to each other in terms of what we call in critical theory, which I'm sure some of you are students of, the homosocial, which is how women are outside of the economy of men and how we are somehow commodified by men in the way that a fancy Italian suit would be, or in the way that they are more in competition with each other and their great tans and their gorgeous bodies, but these are heterosexual men. And I just read that in the book, and that actually is, I think, how Brett Ellis's gayness comes into the book, is that he also brought that to the narrative, and I thought, oh, we can make a good movie here. And I also knew women are going to hate us. Some women are going to hate us. Some people are not going to get it. And also, it's the risk you take making a movie that you might not know. We're going to try. We're going to try to make the movie that we want to make, but it may not be successful, what we attempt. And I was telling Steph's class earlier today, Gloria Steinem, the mother of feminism, spoke out against the book, and then she actively campaigned for the movie not to be made. And I was saying, if you told me when I was 18 and a college student and a new student of feminism, that Gloria Steinem, the mother of feminism, would speak out against anything that I was about to do when I was 30, I would have just burst into tears and just asked the universe, what do I become when I'm 30? Like, how do I make something that makes the mother of feminism speak out against me? That's really tragic. But to see you. And then I met Gloria Steinem actually last year, which I was so excited to meet her. And I was just standing there like, you're Gloria Steinem. And my friend who was standing next to me goes, by the way, she wrote American Psycho. I was like, oh God, no, don't tell her. I want to hear her experience. And she said, I think that whoever made that movie was molested as a child. I'm like, and now I'm going to cry anew. She still hates it. But luckily I've grown up and I'm like, okay, Gloria Steinem, you do Gloria Steinem and I'll do Guinevere Turner and we'll be fine. But I don't think she's ever seen the movie, but I do know that she will continue to speak out against it, which is a little painful.
What do you all think?
I think it's a very obvious satire. And so I think in doing so, it obviously shows what it's speaking against.
Thank you. That was what we were going for.
Yeah. So
A for you.
I think not seeing the movie might have been the thing there for her. But
What was the question? Or what was the answer to the question?
Just what do you think about the movie from a feminist perspective?
And she just said that she perceived it obviously to be a satire, which is, I affirm that is absolutely what we meant it to be. But sitting through it, I have to say, I'm like, it's a rough satire to sit through. Like there are a lot of moments that I still watch where I'm taken aback by just sort of rape culture that we live in, where you're actually living in a scene where you're like, what's going to happen to her, and it's going to be bad, and especially after you get to know the character, it's going to be really bad. And I'm like, yeah, we did this, and it's like a stand-up comedian who's going to like run with a joke until it's so uncomfortable that everyone in the room is uncomfortable, and then be like, okay, you're good. No, we really mean it like this. It's really, I apologize, I was a little flippant at the beginning. I haven't seen the movie in a while.
Had you seen it before?
No.
That was your first time. Other thoughts, yeah?
Well, this is my second time seeing it. The first time I saw it, it was like 12 a.m. and I'm in winter break. I'm like, oh, I saw it. Let's watch American Psycho on Netflix. And honestly, after I watched it, I was like, what the hell did I just watch? Because my first view of it was, wow, this dude's crazy. That movie is very bloody. I thought my mom didn't walk in. But now that I'm here, and you're like, well, I saw it as a comedy, like, when I look back at it again, I'm seeing it again, I do see how it's kind of making fun of, those guys that sit in their nice suits and everything, and their priorities are, like, vanity and things like that, things don't really matter. And then the way they talk about women and things like that, and I see how it is kind of making fun of it, kind of like showing how trivial and things like these big Wall Street people are and things like that. So very disturbing, but I do see the satirical part of it now that I look back at it and you kind of pointed it out.
I'm so glad. I mean, to me, like as a screenwriter in general, as a filmmaker, I love the moments where you have people laughing and then all of a sudden they're like nervous that they're laughing. Those uncomfortable moments where you're like, what am I complicit in and what am I watching? And how have I gone on this ride and then all of a sudden feel like, why am I even sitting in this theater? To me, are good moments because it makes you think, and it makes you think about what you're willing to go with, especially cinematically, and then how you feel. So I'm glad. I'm also really glad that people watch it a second time.
I have to say I saw a very precise similarity between the characters, the male characters, New York and Mad Men, and the absence of choice that girls or women, if you will, were provided, and they were attracted to the bad boys. And I don't know whether that was intentional or how that morphed into that thinking, but they were so self-absorbed, and they didn't respect women to the extent that they got in the group, and that was probably the cool thing to do. But that part, you know what I'm talking about as far as
Absolutely. I mean, I think for us, creating women characters who are obviously of the era, but also, Courtney is the one who's just high all the time. She doesn't really know what's going on. Mm-hmm. And the character that Reese Witherspoon plays she's super focused on the same materiality. It's just she's not even hearing them. Sure. They're not hearing her. It's all about representing what it meant to be a woman at that time, and in that world, which is the world of really rich men, where if you get to this point and you can be a socialite, then you can be
in charge.
Yeah, but in this, really sad way, and theoretically and hopefully, everyone is sad in the movie, and we had a real struggle making the movie because people would say that there are no sympathetic characters. And that's a constant thing that comes up for me as a screenwriter and as a filmmaker, is are these sympathetic characters?
Who can we like?
Yeah. And it was hard for us to say, you're not supposed to really like anyone. You're supposed to be nervous that he's going to get caught, and that's supposed to make you uncomfortable. Because you weirdly are with this man.
Because why are you rooting for him not to get caught?
But you are. Gotcha.
Jen?
I see a lot of parallels now with the movie, in pop culture, in current events. And so I think it stays with today. But when you made the movie, what different things did you draw from to build those characters, in current events in pop culture? And then how do you see that paralleling things today?
Well, one of the interesting things about making the movie, she's asking about parallels today, especially as it relates to the economy and how we feel about Wall Street people today, which is, obviously, I think part of the movie's popularity now is we really fucking hate these assholes now. Is that, pardon, I may or may not, I am a woman of letters, but I may swear. Is that...
Her talk is also rated R.
Is that we actually really struggle with the fact, because we're making it in the late 90s, is it too soon to make a period movie? Does anyone have perspective on what 80s Wall Street, money, culture, shoulder pads, those glasses, is that something that we can even do? And I think we were right in our instinct that actually it was a little early, because the movie gained so much popularity as it got older. Which is, we just try to call ourselves visionaries and leave it at that. But yeah, we absolutely struggled with what story are we telling in the late 80s, early 90s when we were writing it, or mid 90s, where nobody's that mad at that culture yet. Nobody knows how bad it's gonna get.
I have a question about kind of carrying the book to the movie from the book. In the book, I noticed that Patrick Bateman is definitely an unreliable narrator, and reading it, I felt so disjointed, and I never knew if what was happening was actually real, and just all that craziness that ensued. How did you, were you nervous about carrying that kind of ambiguity over into the movie? How did you go about capturing that?
She's asking about the ambiguity. I'm not sure about the acoustics.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm just really, as someone who's been interviewed a lot for documentaries, I'm always like to repeat the question. We were I wouldn't say we're nervous about the ambiguity of the novel, but we were profoundly conscious. And we said to ourselves, to each other, we hate movies where it was all a dream, or where, you know, we don't really know if any of this really happened. And we said to each other when we started, let us be sure that this is a movie in which he's really killing people. And we worked so hard at that. And there's so much ambiguity in the novel. And we're like, take that out, take that out, take that out. Let's make it like this. And so, you know, the idea is like halfway through the movie, what we're seeing, what the camera's seeing is his perspective going crazy. And I always laugh with Mary because I say we failed. Because the first question people always want to ask me, ask both of us is, was it all in his head? And so we're like, oh, no, it wasn't all in his head. Oh, look, but some of it was in his head. And then I always say, actually, you've accomplished your goal as a filmmaker if people are still talking about your movie. And if people have questions and they care enough to ask.
That's interesting that the ambiguity came through, even so.
Unintentionally.
Right.
We consider this movie a failure.
Go ahead.
Oh,
You.
okay. Okay, you were saying earlier that you wanted us to feel nervous that he was about to get caught. I'm gonna like kind of compare this. Like I was watching The Talented Mr. Ripley, and he, kills people frequently, just like Mr. Bateman. And it's like when I was watching The Talented Mr. Ripley, I felt nervous that he might get caught, or I felt like, even though he was like a terrible person, I was like, no, just don't catch him. But with this movie, I was kind of like, yeah, go get him. He's killing people. That's crazy. Like I know you didn't want us to like him, but I mean, what kind of effort did you put in for us to make us feel, or try to make us feel nervous that he was going to get caught?
We always talked about it as a fable. So we're not telling a real story in a real world. Obviously, it's a hyper-real world. So what we want is for you to identify with this character as a person who exists in a society that we understand and recognize, who is going to go through some motions, that is going to tell us an allegory about this time. And so in that way, we always felt like we could get away with it a little bit. Like you don't have to love him, and you don't have to be that with him. I mean, I don't know if you guys know that Todd Solondz's film, is it Happiness, where like it's a pedophile, and like there's a point where he's like giving Timmy the tuna sandwich, and I love Todd Solondz for this. You're like, don't give him the tuna sandwich, you're gonna get caught. And I'm like, how am I sympathizing with a pedophile? This filmmaker is so masterful because I can't believe I'm here. And that's, it's that. That to me is an uncomfortable, beautiful space, but also it's about the fact that it's not a romantic comedy. There is no redemption. It is like, if we have done our job correctly, you will just care what happens, even if you don't like him. Alice, you have something?
Oh, I was struck by the undercurrent of food and clothing that went through the entire thing. The importance of the clothing and the beauty of the food. So how much of that is a reflection of the characters themselves?
Well, it's absolutely supposed to be a movie in which all the characters elevate aesthetics above anything else. And so that had to be what was represented. And I was actually struck, once again, having not seen the film in a long time, by the opening credit sequence.
Yes.
And that, I'm not the director, obviously, that's all Mary, where you think you're thinking of blood, and you're thinking of a knife, and obviously the movie's called American Psycho, and all of a sudden we're talking about food and sort of like a disgusting precision around food that nobody in their right mind can afford. And in the movie, nobody's eating. It was just about getting to the restaurant to not eat the food and just mess with each other and just be present. So aesthetics were everything. We were just like, it has to be about the most shallow thing that you can focus on while people are being killed, and that juxtaposition.
You're friends with Michael Hall. Clearly, Dexter, the intro of Dexter is taken from, you guys have all seen that, right?
I think they stole that.
They clearly stole that from the beginning, right? Tell us if you could tell them actually the story about Mary and Willem Dafoe in the scene where he's interviewing Patrick in the diner.
So there's a scene between, I'm forgetting the character's name, but anyway, Willem Dafoe and Christian Bale when he's really, you don't know what's happening. And Mary did something so interesting that inspires me as a director, which is she asked Willem, who's a masterful actor, who I hung out with once, and his son, who was 13, was like, I want to be an actor, Dad. And Willem was like, really? You do? Don't be an actor. You're such a talented, amazing actor. You do not want his son to be an actor. Just a funny side note. But Mary said, she said to Willem, do one take like you absolutely don't know if he's the killer. Do one take like you are convinced he's the killer. And do one where you're convinced that he's not. And then she edited those 3 takes together to make that performance, which I think is something that it would be so much the demand of an actor. Just do it like all 3 of these things. But what a great idea. Just actually have him do it 3 ways and make it into something where you're looking at like, does he know, does he not know? Which is, obviously heightens the anxiety of the character that you're allegedly with.
Thanks. I absolutely love horror movies, and this was my first time watching American Psycho, and I thought it was brilliant. And second, I heard online that Christian Bale used Tom Cruise's mannerisms as his inspiration for Bateman's mannerisms, and I want to know if that's true or not.
It's so funny. I'm so happy that I knew Christian before he was the rock star that he is today, because obviously I did a sex scene with him when I got killed, so like that's a level of intimacy that he doesn't normally get. And he's such an amazing actor to work with. He did absolutely speak in that American accent. He's British. The entire time, on and off screen, he was never present on the set. He was never present for any socializing. He was always on the phone. Actually, there were videotapes to return at that point. He was always returning videotapes and like eating 1 chicken breast. I mean, he was, as we all know about Christian, but we didn't know then, like a scientist, an actor. And when he came to, I am getting back to your question, by the way. When he came to audition for us, he had just gotten off a plane. It was 19 hours of traveling and whatever. He was super skinny, he was super pale. He had adorable sort of David Bowie teeth. And he was rumpled. And I was there in the audition, I was looking at Mary like, this guy, really? Because he was famous for being in Empire of the Sun, which is a Spielberg movie when he was 13, which, by the way,
Awesome.
yeah. Whoa, that's such an incredible performance. I hadn't seen it at the time, I was like, who is this dude? And then he did the audition and I was like, wow, what an actor. And so he, told us personally, it wasn't Tom Cruise. First of all, he had his teeth straightened. He turned his body into the Adonis that you see on the screen. And he just said he had an American lawyer who he thought was a complete asshole. And so he wasn't imitating Tom Cruise, he was imitating that guy who was just like the only real American asshole that he knew.
Yes, and then Jen.
I haven't read the book, but I was wondering if the audience inferred that Bateman had some homosexual, deeply rooted urges, because the movie Shame reminds me of this. And that was kind of a similar, he was a sex addict, but he had these deeply rooted tendencies, and so the bathroom scene, where he seemed so repulsed by the idea of being mistaken for homosexual. I was wondering if that was involved in the book at all, or if that was just my interpretation.
It's so funny. I'm so far removed from the book because I just read it, and I was like, okay, I never have to read that again. I think there's more sort of implication that he may or may not be gay in the book. But we didn't want that in the movie because it's, you know, like we have enough gay serial killers in movies, or sort of gay or sort of bisexual serial killers in movies, and to us that's not what the movie was about. So I think we just, you know, cut that off as much as possible, but just the whole idea that someone would be coming onto you in a bathroom, but then you would think that that you're trying to kill them, they're coming on to you, and then it's just a big misunderstanding. Was just too hilarious. And I love Matt Ross, who plays the Lewis in the movie, because it was initially supposed to be who's the guy from Sideways? Amazing, Paul Giamatti. He was attached till the very end, and you know we did readings with him, and you can imagine he was brilliant. And so you always lose actors at the last minute and think like, oh, that would have been the perfect thing. But then Matt Ross, I mean, he improvised, which to me was like, I love when actors do the thing.
Jen.
Okay, I totally didn't want to ask about this, but his teeth drive me crazy in the movie. So what's the deal with that, since you brought up the fact that he had his teeth straight, like what was happening there? The way he's talking and his teeth, like...
Well, I think that the teeth and how he's talking are related but separate factors. I think that's also just it was his way, because I agree, like it's, the way he talks is so weird, but that's friggin' Christian Bale. Like to me, he just nailed, like, I'm just gonna be a really slightly off, super gorgeous person. And so it might seem like it's his teeth, but actually I think he just made like really important, really subtle actor choices to just be a guy who you're like, and I think he succeeded. I think he does it for the whole movie.
Yeah.
So what exactly did his secretary find in the planner, I guess? Like, I was out of nowhere, she found a planner and it was just drawings of everything that was going on. So like, the killings were real, but they weren't, but I was so confused. And then I was like, there's a picture with all the drawings, and I'm like, what's going on? And I'm just gonna be quiet now. It's the journal, a whole drawing and everything.
I think the implication was that, I mean, as you can see in the movie, like, he's just a complete asshole of her, and then he tries to kill her, and she just somehow, like, accidentally gets out of it. That she just, it was her first realization, like, flip. Like, this guy seemed a little weird, and now he's a killer. And it just is meant to be that subtle. Like, what, you know, what's gonna happen to him? Does she go to the police? Blah, blah, blah. It's more like, and especially the way that Chloe plays that scene, it's like she's actually sad because she realized that the guy that she had a big crush on might be a serial killer. So it was really more about her. And that's how she was directed, and that's how we wrote it. Just like, oh my God, he's totally weird. I love her. He was so cute.
Oh, I was just wondering, I thought the business card scene was hilarious. I was just wondering if you could like talk a little bit about what went into writing that, and maybe how it was like, maybe acting choices and like directing choices and stuff like that.
That scene is absolutely like the one that people love so much. And also when you're adapting a novel, it's like, we just, you know, we read it together over and over and over, and read it to each other over and over, and had actors read it to us over and over. And we're like, okay, that's funny, that's amazing. And we just made a pile of scenes and thought, how do we make this into a movie? How do we structure it into a movie? And that one really stood out just because of all of that dialogue and all of those details about the fonts and the thickness and the watermark and all of that is completely Brett Ellis. I cannot take credit for it. It was just too hilarious. Like, I wouldn't even be able to name 5 fonts right now if you asked me, except for the movie. Now I can. It's really real. And the thing about that scene that I always like to point out is that what really works, if you go back and watch that scene, is sound design. And it's one of my first experiences sitting in the sound mix. in a dark room with someone who's brilliant at something that I'm not brilliant at and Mary's not brilliant at, like a sound technician who really understands what you're trying to go for in a scene. There's not a lot of dialogue in that scene, and there's voiceover, but it's all about, well, it's Mary's direction, obviously, about like when cards come in and out of focus, and it's Christian like dropping it. Just like, this is like the worst thing that's ever happened to me. It's all of that. I mean, it's a scene that is just a confluence of amazing people coming together to make a brilliant scene. But really, to me, it's always been about the sound design for that scene. It's just that, like, the sound goes out, his heart starts beating, you hear his voice, and it's a little bit shaky. And then the other actors are like, they also get a little bit, okay, yeah, let's, fine. But he's just freaking out. To me, that scene is, as I said, it's always been what it looks like when everybody who's really good at what they do it all at once. Yes?
As a screenwriter in general, do you have a go-to system or format or any tricks that you use when you're writing? And what tips would you give to beginning screenwriters?
That's coming tomorrow.
OMG, I could talk about that for 3 hours, which I will do tomorrow. I would say the short version of that is simply that I have always either written what I love or taken on projects that seem like they already come from brilliant things, like, well, working with Mary and working on, taking that novel, which was such the opposite of what we needed it to be, and just like, I'm gonna dig my teeth into this challenge. I think, but it's really that you can't be in it for the glory or the money, because I'm gonna tell you, it didn't always come.
I was curious, I don't know if you know or even remember what A, the budget was for music for that film, and then B, just the overall budget for that film?
I guess 14 years later, I'm allowed to say it was around $5 million.
Overall.
Mm-hmm. The music budget, I don't know.
Okay.
But what I can tell you about the music is how we sort of had to write it assuming and hoping that we would get the songs that are so important to the plot. And I'm sure you notice as a music person that, or anyone who loves Whitney Houston, notice that we got a sounds alike for the Whitney Houston scene, because Whitney Houston was not giving it. I think that we really got Phil Collins and we really got Huey Lewis, and I know we got Katrina and the Waves, and we got so much great stuff. But Whitney Houston's people, Whitney herself, were just like, are you kidding me? Two hookers make out, and then he goes down her and she dies, but first they make fun of me. And so, like, what was so interesting going through the process of, like, having people do a sounds alike, where he's talking about the greatest love of all, and you're hearing this piece of music that sounds ish enough like it, that if you're paying attention to what's happening on the screen, you wouldn't be super aware of it. Yeah, but I'm sure it was huge. But the music supervisor, Randall Poster, is like the rock star of music supervisor. He's also, I'm sure, can just call up Phil Collins and be like, listen, baby, it's going to be a good movie. But, it's interesting, and I was just talking with Mary about this the other day, is that in the scene where he's like dragging the body and he puts it in the back of the car and he runs into Lewis, who's like, oh, what a beautiful overnight bag. Initially, that was Comme des Garçons, the bag. And Comme des Garçons was like, hell no. You are not giving us like a really fancy overnight bag in your serial killer movie. And so that's why he only says overnight bag in a movie that's so full of labels that obviously... We don't want product placement in the trunk. Yeah. We had that a lot with, it's interesting when all the name checks of designers and musicians and whatever, who said yes and who said no, because it was a big risk at the time, that movie, to associate yourself with it. It wasn't necessarily going to be cool. It might have just been like the grossest, weirdest movie ever that everyone's going to hate, even if it, and showing that people who love labels are serial killers and assholes.
And now they're all bummed, like, dang it,
oh god damn it,
should have been part of that one.
So is it Come to Go Song like the dude that John Waters works with all the time? Is that the...
That is a fact I do not know.
I believe so. So it's weird that John Waters is all like all over this brand and then they're like no to this movie.
Probably because they said no to this, they were like, never gonna say no again.
Yes, I don't know, but that's an interesting fact. But you know, John Waters is so different. Like it's so deeply tongue-in-cheek that you can get that like it would create an ironic audience. Whereas this, the first-time thing might have been like, oh, it's to go either way.
Yes.
As I'm sure you know, they've taken American Psycho and turned it into a musical in London. So I was just wondering how you feel about that, you know, taking from book to film, from book/film into musical, just your reaction to that, I guess. As a theater person, not a film student, but I love this.
Well, the funny fact about the novel adaptation to film is that we were the 6th team to attempt to adapt this novel. And one of the adaptations was Bret Ellis's, the novelist, and his adaptation ended in a huge musical number with Patrick Bateman singing a love song to New York. So, with that fact in mind, I think it makes perfect sense. I think Bret always thought it was novel to me. It was straight to musical. You know?
I feel that sense, knowing it's great.
But I'm, needless to say, dying to see that musical. I can't imagine. All I know is I will be laughing heartily in the audience when I see it.
If you haven't seen images of it, it's on the New York Times. There's a great article on there. It's amazing to look at visually as well, just like the title sequence.
I read a review, and the review made me think that I love that I've been a part of an intellectual property, for lack of a better term, that has so many incarnations and so much love and so many people wanting to take it this way and that way. But to me, I'm like, oh, the spirit of it is so not musical. But then Bret Ellis now says he doesn't think this book ever should have been made into a movie. So we're all coming from our genres, I guess, in our creative perspectives. Yes?
So back to the ambiguity of Bateman's mind's reality versus what's actually happening in the movie, and how you chop that up to being sort of a failure. I mean, you're laughing about it, but
You're like, it really is a failure?
no, I'm like, yet this seems to be a question that comes up a lot, and the success is evident in film. These questions are still about. So would you say that maybe that failure is part of its success? Like if all these questions are still about, like, well, what was it? Explain it to me.
I mean, I guess I would take your question as what would I have changed knowing what I know now?
Would you have?
Or would I have changed anything?
Kind of, are you okay with the irony of, like...
I am always okay with irony. I actually am so happy with the way that it continues to create conversations and basically just get attention because I'm an attention whore. That was supposed to be way funnier than it is. I like it. I mean, like I said before, I feel like it's, it's really, like any movie that continues a conversation to me is a success always, because we all know the experience of seeing a movie that may or may not have made us laugh or cry, but then next day you're thinking about your regular life rather than being like, wait, did you see that movie? What did you think about that? Do you think that sex scene in Blue is the Warmest Color was okay or exploitive or blah, blah, blah? Whatever keeps you talking to me is like why we not only make films but make art and write things. It's just, what keeps us talking to an actual person next to us about what they think.
Would you have done anything different in hindsight?
I wouldn't have been so hungover when I was acting in the movie. Seriously, I was so hungover.
It worked for your character.
I know, I was like, oh yeah, I just get to be this slutty bitch, so.
Other thoughts? Questions?
I'll never be able to listen to Susu Studio without seeing Christian Bale. Like, it's gonna come on the radio. I'm like, oh God!
I had just a funny Christian Bale story is that, so when we did that sex scene, he's obviously in his sneakers, and we had to do this scene, and I was being directed by my friend Mary, who's my longtime collaborator, for the first time as director and actor. So I was kind of nervous in a new regard, but someone who's a really close friend. And so we're about to do the sex scene, and it's all busy set, and it's time to do the sex scene, and we're just sitting on the bed on the set. And it's me and Christian, and he's just pretty much naked with sneakers on. And I have the little fake thing right here, and she's all, so, what do you think we should do? I'm like, so much pressure. And Christian's like, well, I actually think that I should just flip her over, fuck her from behind, then I flip her over again, and I go down, and then we just struggle with the sheets, and then we're good. Well, alrighty then. Let's do that. Thanks for the intervention. But then, so one of the things that, there's modesty socks for penises, and there's merkins for women when you're doing sex scenes, and so he had a modesty sock on his penis, and so, I know, it's good, I like it. And so, we have to struggle in the scene because our job is that there's a blood packet actually taped right here. So we have to do the sex scene, then we have to do the struggle, then he has to go under the covers, he has to bite it and break the blood packet, and it's our job to make the blood seep through the sheets, because that's sort of the money shot, if you will. And so we're like, good, we got it, we're pros. We do it once, we're both covered in fake blood, nothing on the sheets, not a drop. And that is in film terms, a reset that takes a good hour. We have to clean ourselves, they have to remake the bed, they have to redo the blood packet, and we're just as filmmakers, well, for me and Mary, she's like, really, guys? And Kristen's just, a scientist, precision actor, so he's also like, how can we do this better, how can we whatever? So we went and asked Mary to show us playback, how much are we in the frame, how much struggle room do we have? And so we walk around to watch the playback. Mr. Bale walks out in all but his sneakers. Just standing there completely naked with that body and the sneakers. I'm in a bathrobe. And we're watching the monitor, and Mary's all, not at me. She's a heterosexual woman, by the way. I was just like, whoa. And the whole crew is just like, whoa. There's this man just standing there. But we're both really studying the monitor, because we had been sort of laughing because it was so chaotic. And then we're like, oh my God, this is a really scary thing we're shooting. We need to, get serious. And so we did it, and we nailed it, and it was all good. But, I would tell the story in the press, I would say, all Christian was wearing was some sneakers and a little sock on his penis. And he was like, Guinevere, darling, could you just really not say little? That's my closing story about a small penis with a sock on.
Okay, well, thank you guys for coming. Thank you.